Hello and welcome, my name is Anne, and in this video I'm going to demonstrate how to cast on stitches for a toe-up sock using the Judy cast on method. Here as an example, I've already started a sock using this method, so I've already knitted the toe part of the sock. My actual casting on was in this section here. I'm knitting the sock on different types of needles to what I'm be demonstrating the casting on method in this tutorial. The needles are from Addy, they're called Crazy Trio. They're kind of a double pointed needles with a very short lace in the middle here, which allows this flexibility and bendiness when knitting. For this tutorial, I'm going to be using circular needles with a long lace. My lace is around 1 meter, but if your lace is anything between 50 centimeters to a meter, it's perfectly fine. Whatever needles you're using for this method, you need to check that this area here of the needle is nice and smooth. Otherwise, very often, if the needles are not very smooth in this area, you could struggle. Struggle with tension. You could struggle with gliding the stitches back onto the needle, and that could cause problems and some delays in knitting. As an example of needles which are not as suitable for this method of knitting are these needles from Pony. I tried to use these needles once for knitting socks and for magic loop method. I struggled with them because of these grooves here where the lace joins to the main needle. It kind of is not a smooth join, which prevents the stitches from gliding back and forth effortlessly. For this tutorial, I'm going to cast on 10 stitches. Depending on your pattern, you might have less or more stitches to cast on. This tutorial is not about how to determine the number of stitches for your sock. It's to show how this method works. For 20 stitches, we need a shortish tail. I've got about 15 centimeters here. 15 to 20 centimeters should be enough. And I hold my yarn the way I do for a long tail cast on, like so. And my needles need to be held kind of parallel, like so, like we hold chopsticks almost. So I've got my back and front needle here. To insert the back needle into my gap here and kind of twist the yarn to create this loop. You can see the yarn twists here. So that's my first stitch done. And then I'm going to wrap my yarn this way. Wrap each needle with the yarn. So firstly, it's yarn that's on my index finger. It's going to go over the front needle, and the yarn here goes in between the two needles. And then again, the yarn that's on my thumb goes in between the two needles and out. So you just need to remember that the yarn that's on my index finger goes over the front needle, and the yarn that's on my thumb goes over the back needle. If you've noticed, the yarn always goes through the middle in between the two needles. And I'm continuing this process until I have 10 stitches on each needle. I haven't been counting, so I just need to double check what I've got in here. Just turn our stitches over so that our working yarn is on our right side here. Our tail end of the yarn should be tucked in nicely here. And what we're going to do now, we're going to pull out this needle here at the bottom, pulling out sufficient lace so that we can maneuver this needle. And then we're going to knit first half of our cast on stitches. So if we look at this first stitch here, and to make sure it doesn't unravel because it's quite loose, it's not fixed at the bottom, you can actually start the first stitch with a slip knot, but I prefer to do it this way because the result looks tidier in my opinion. So first stitch, it's quite loose because it's not fixed at the bottom, and that's fine because we're going to knit it through the back loop, which will fix it in place. I'm just gonna knit it through the back loop and pull the yarn at the bottom, and then just knit through the remainder of the stitches as normal. So we just knit as we usually knit. Right, so this is the first half of the cast on stitches done. To turn our knitting over, the needle that was at the top is now at the bottom. We need to pull this needle back in onto the stitches, back onto this needle, and you can see how important it is for the stitches to glide on and off, and then pull this one out because we've already knitted this row. Use this now needle for knitting the second half of the stitches. So if we look carefully again here for this on the second half, our stitches, the front stitch doesn't look like we would normally expect it to look, and that's fine. What we need to do here again is to knit it through the back loop so we don't end up with a big hole there in that area, like so. Let's have a look at the remainder of the stitches, and here we see that our stitches are positioned quite the same as they were positioned in the first half of the cast on stitches, and the reason for that is because we alternated the direction of the cast on stitches for the front and back needles. So what we need to do here is pick this back loop, kind of this loop that's positioned at the back of the needle, and knit through it. This will prevent from stitches being twisted. As we're knitting these stitches, they're repositioning the right way. And then the last stitch needs to be a twisted stitch again, so we're not picking the back loop here, we're picking the front loop, because if we do the back loop we'll end up with a big hole. We don't want that, so we just need to pick this front part of the stitch and knit through it. The first round has now been completed. What I like to do is to knit another half round to fix this area so that that increases it better on my sock. So again, I'm just going to pull this needle out and push the stitches back onto this needle. And knit another half of the stitches. So the first stitch here again needs to be knitted as through the back loop as well, because otherwise it will be it will not sit right. This tail here needs to be pushed to the back. I'm just going to do that so it's not in my way, and then I'm just going to knit these stitches to the end of this half round. So all our stitches at this point now should be well positioned and ready for increases. This is what your face side of the knitting should look like, and the wrong side should look like this. If you make in 1.5 rounds like I've done, then I recommend repositioning the beginning of the round to here. So this becomes halfway through the round, and this end becomes the beginning of the round. Now I've done the first step in the toe up sock, where I've cast on the stitches, knitted 1.5 rounds, and now my knitting is ready for the increases. And that is it for today. I hope you found this video useful. Thank you very much for watching. Bye for now.